I'm Miss Tasha, and today I will be teaching you guys this really fun Father's Day fish project. So the supplies that I will be using, I have watercolor paper here. It's kind of big, it doesn't have to be this big. A paper towel, and if you want to reuse a paper towel from a previous art project, that's awesome, I do it all the time. Cup of water to rinse my brushes. I'll be using 3 brushes, this larger kind of rough brush for my background, this medium round brush, and I have a little detail brush here. But if you guys don't have a little detail brush, or if you are not comfortable outlining in a paintbrush, you can also use a black marker, that works just as well. Also have a paint palette. If you guys don't have a palette, that's okay, it's not a big deal. You can use a paper plate or any old plate. Just make sure it's not one that your parents really love. And I have acrylic paint here, and you guys can see all the colors I'll be using right here. But again, if you don't have the same supplies, you can use a whole bunch of different supplies. You can use tempera paint, watercolor, crayons, markers, colored pencils. You can use canvas instead if you want. That's all up to you and what you have available. Your art's still going to turn out really cool, so let's get started. So to get started, I'm going to be using this brush just so I can kind of get my background done pretty quickly. And I will be using white paint, light blue, and dark blue. So I'm going to start with my white, and I'm just going to paint at the top. And since I'm using paper and paint, I'm going to not paint all the way to my edges just to help keep my paper from rolling up. If you get any brush hairs or your hair in there, you can pick those right out. And then I have almost a third here painted with my white. And I'm going to take my light blue, and right under my white, I'm going to do long brush strokes back and forth. Make sure you have enough paint on there. And I'm just going to go up into my white a little to blend it in. Still not painting all the way to my edges. I'm going to take that light blue, paint a little farther down. Long brush strokes. And right under that, I'm going to use my dark blue. Do the same thing I just did, long brush strokes, and I'm going to start painting up into my light blue. And you can see the colors will start to blend really nicely. At the bottom here, I'm just going to add more dark blue. Again, you can see I'm not painting all the way to the edge. And then when you're all done with that, rinse your brush off. You can dry it off. With acrylic, it's really important that you make sure you rinse your brushes well. Just because if you don't, the paint will dry in there and get crusty, and it won't be a very nice brush to use next time. I'm actually going to let this dry, and I will come back in just a couple minutes. You guys can pause your video, let your background dry, come back in a couple minutes, and we will start on our fish. So I've got a nice dry background here. You can see I can touch it. There's not paint all over my hands. And then the next colors I will be using are brown, green, yellow, and white. And I will be using my medium round brush. And something I forgot to mention for your background is when you're pouring your paint, remember you can always pour more, but you can't really put it back, so just be mindful of that, not pour paint all over. So I'm going to take my green, I'm going to find about the center. I'm going to move over almost all the way to the left side here, and I'm going to start my fish. So I've got this nice green diagonal line here, we're gonna curve it. It's gonna get kind of like a frowny face with an extra little line over here. This is where his tail's gonna go. And then right at this point here, I'm gonna do another diagonal line going the other way. And then I'm gonna put a little hook on the end, kind of like a candy cane shape. And then I'm going to switch to my white. I'm not even gonna rinse my brush just because we're gonna be painting and blending this whole fish. I'm gonna put a little line right there, not quite at the tip, a little before it. And then I'm gonna make a smiley on the other side. And it's got a little bit of room on the side here where we're gonna put the tail. So I'm just gonna switch back to my green and I'm gonna paint along the top of my fish. Make sure you're really spreading your paint out, just because if you have big globs on there, it will take forever to dry. Remember, if I'm going too quick for anyone, you can always pause me and work at your own pace. I'm also going to paint in this little area here. And then right about in the middle of my fish, add a little more green. Right in the middle, I'm going to switch to my yellow. I'm not even gonna rinse my brush. I'm just gonna start painting with my yellow. You can paint a little bit into your green, and then we're gonna paint almost the whole rest of the fish. Just gonna keep blending this in here. If your paint is dry, then it's a little harder to blend. So if your green and your yellow are wet, they will blend really nicely. Remember, we don't want it too wet, then it won't dry. And then right at the bottom, I'm gonna take my white. I didn't rinse my brush. Just gonna paint white right at the bottom and blend that into what I already have. I'm using long brush strokes. And there's the main part of my fish. I'm going to rinse my brush off. Dry it really well on my paper towel. Remember, this is not watercolor. We don't want a whole bunch of water in our paint. And then I'm going to take my brown, and right about here, I'm gonna add a little triangle shape, just with my brown. You can go ahead and fill that in. I'm also gonna add right about the top of my fish in the middle, I'm gonna add some lines, like little spiky fins up here. And you can see they get taller in the middle and shorter on the sides. You can do about 5 or 6 lines or so. And then right next to that, I'm gonna have a line going up. Then I'm gonna curve it over and go back down to my fish's back. We're gonna fill that in with brown. He's just got a little fin right there. We're gonna add a fin right here, kind of like a sideways L. I'm gonna fill that in with brown. And then right at the tail, I'm gonna do a diagonal line going up and a diagonal line going down. And then to connect them, I've got 2 kind of backwards C-shaped bumps, like 2 parentheses. And then we can go ahead and fill that in as well. And for my last fin, I'm not gonna rinse my brush, but I'm gonna take some yellow And right under this little brown triangle fin, I'm gonna do another kind of sideways L shape. And just fill that in. And go ahead and rinse your brush off. Dry it off really well. Then I'm gonna take a little more brown and I'm just going to kind of dab some brown right along the center of my fish. And you can see I'm not squishing my brush down this way. I want to be really nice to my brush. So I'm just going to kind of use the side to dab some brown in there. If you dab around the edges of what you have, then it'll blend it in a little. And I'm going to do the same thing around the top here. So a little bit of brown. I'm going to rinse and dry my brush. And then we're going to use white. So make sure your green is pretty dry here. You don't want it to be really wet or you're going to end up with a green eyeball. And then I'm just going to add a little circle of white and I'm going to fill that in. I'm getting kind of a green eyeball, so it's a little wet. Can always go over it later when it dries if I want. And I'm going to take my brown again. I rinsed and dried my brush. I'm going to put a little hat on my fish. My hat is just a little kind of a smiley line right here, right on top of his head. And then kind of like a soft M. And then I'm just going to fill that in. It's a smiley with an M on top. The last thing I'm going to add to my fish after I rinse and dry my brush, I'm going to use red. You guys can use whatever color you want. And I'm going to add a tie since he's a Father's Day fish. So right, we find his mouth, right below that, I'm going to add a little triangle. It's an upside down triangle, points down. I'm going to add 2 lines. They can be curved, they can be straight, that's up to you. And then I'm gonna make them meet in another triangle on the bottom. See, there's a triangle, and then we're gonna fill that in with whatever color you picked for your tie. And then if your fish is pretty dry from your tie, mine's not pretty dry, but that's okay. We're gonna add a big parenthesis shape or a big kind of backwards C for the tie to wrap around our dad fish. And then when you are done with that, if there are any details that you want to add that I don't have on here, maybe you want a baby fish, that's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and let this dry, so you can pause your video, have a snack, take a walk, whatever you want to do, and we will meet back here when it's all dry. So here we are with our dried picture. I have my little detail brush. Again, if you guys want to use a black marker for this, that's up to you. It'll work just as well. Just make sure your paint is dry. And we're going to take the black paint or your black marker, and I'm going to outline my fish. I'm going to put a little dot in the eye. I kind of like how fish eyes just look with a little tiny dot, but if you want to make it a bigger pupil, you can. That's up to you. And I'm gonna outline around my white. I'm gonna put a little curvy line under the eye just to make it look a little extra bulgy. And then right at the tip here at the front of the mouth, I'm gonna follow this line that I made earlier with my green. And I'm also gonna follow the kind of candy cane hook shape I made up here. I'm gonna outline the top of the head. For outlining my hat, I'm gonna outline a little bit farther in on the bottom part. You can see the lines go in a little farther than just the edges. And then I'm gonna outline the top just like an M. Outline my little spikes here. And if your outline is a little bit off, that's okay. Mine is too. Nobody's perfect. Make sure we get here. And whenever I outline a fin, I'm gonna do the outline first, and then inside I'm just gonna do some little lines for any of the fins. Just kind of following the shapes that we already made. And this is a fin, so I'm going to put little lines in here. Put lines in this fin. Lines in that fin. And if you can only fit 1 or 2 lines, that's okay. One more fin right here. I'm going to outline my tie. Remember, just take your time and do your best. And once you're all done with that, you can keep using your black or you can switch to a white. And I'm still going to use my little brush. And I'm just going to add a couple little bubbles. So for my bubbles, I'm doing almost a whole circle, kind of like a little C backwards there. And I'm going to add a little curvy line in it, just a little light reflecting off. And I'm going to make a couple bigger, some smaller. I'm just gonna do 3. You guys can do more, you can do less. If you don't want any bubbles, that's up to you. And then you can see on here, I wrote Happy Father's Day in bubbly letters. I just think that helps it stay with the nice fishy theme we have going on. But if you want to give this to someone else, maybe grandpa or maybe mom really likes fish, that's up to you. You don't have to write Happy Father's Day. You can write I love you, you're the best. You can leave it plain. That's all up to you. I'm going to leave this one plain. And then if you want any other details, now's the time to add those. And then when you're all done, you can go ahead and sign your work. And then that's the whole project. I hope you guys really enjoyed that lesson. I did, and I know my dad's really gonna love it. And I just wanted to show you guys, these are both mine, they're both different. Your art's gonna be different than mine. It's gonna be different than your friends. That's the great thing about art. It's all different, and it's so awesome. If you guys enjoyed that, feel free to hit like and subscribe. It's a really great, easy way to support free art. And if you post your finished project on Instagram or anything, we're on there too. Feel free to tag Creating Art with Natalie. We love to see what you guys create, and I'll see you next time.